Hey, back once again. This time with our 1986 Ford car facts book. Well, even though it doesn't say facts book, that's what it is. Basically the same thing as existing books. Just different design. Typical fashion, I will go through a few of the general information and then we'll dive into our cars. So that'd be the Escort and EXPs. And then we'll get towards the end of the book, because after you get past all of the vehicles, it's then the color and trim options, powertrain options, general options that are available across the board, all the cars. Some safety features it talks about, and then a little bit of towing information. So how all these start is there's a tab at the beginning for general information, and this will go over a few things like their corrosion resistance, and then some general chassis features, and then they'll talk about some aerodynamics. Especially come 1986, they had actually started designing their vehicles through computer program. So then through computer simulation, they were able to make a lot of their cars streamlined. And that's why at 1986, basically all of the Fords across the board had been smoothed over up front, let alone the whole rest of the car, depending on the body we're talking about. Occasionally you'll see like VIN information. That doesn't come up too often. So let's dive in. There's some odds and ends about the quality. Some of their robotics assembly system, 5 mile per hour bumper system, and nothing outstanding. They do go over the suspension pretty thoroughly. And let's see here. So they have the front suspension for the EXP, Escort, and Tempo. And this picture is demonstrating the front suspension for all their rear-wheel drive cars. Keep going. Hey, there we go. Front suspension system for the Taurus actually pops up in here. And for those paying attention, it's basically the same as the EXP and Escorts. The only difference is, you notice the sway bar goes through the lower control arms, so that way you have less moving pieces in the suspension. But for the Taurus, they have a separate roll bar that attaches to the top parts of the strut, and then they have a dedicated, what they call it, a tension strut with a dedicated, we'll say, trailing arm for these lower control arms. Talks about that some. And then front suspension again for the rear wheel drive cars. Well, that's the same as the ones we've already shown you. Rear suspension, that's where things get a little interesting. You can actually see the EXP and Tempo 1 side by side. They are different. Yes, I know the entire front half of the car is the same, but the back half is a different story. Tempo uses McPherson struts in the rear. The Escort and EXP, they use a separate strut and a separate coil spring. The Tempo's is much closer to what you would find in the Ford Contours and the Taurus. While the EXP and the Escort, that's kind of its own deal. And then they go over rear suspension for all the rear-wheel drive cars. Nothing really outstanding, because those at this point in time do not have independent rear suspension. And then they dive into the Taurus, and like I said, it's the same as the Tempos. For the station wagon Tauruses, these are closer to what our Escorts have. Like, much closer. Far more comparable. But if one wanted to, you see that the center mounts for the center control arms are about the same as the ones for these twin wishbones, I think they call them. I just call them spaghetti arms because it doesn't take much to bend them. You'll leave a parking lot just a little too quick and you'll bend them. And then they go over some of the technical jargon for each of these cars. Nothing we're too concerned about. I kind of showed you what each one was, how they compare with the others. And then we get into steering systems. Well, rack and pinion steering kind of got standardized across all these cars now. At this point in time, I think Ford finally ditched the steering box system for their passenger cars. You'd still see them in trucks, but they're gone as far as the car goes. Then they talk about the dual diagonal braking system. Still somewhat uncommon at the time, but should you have brake failure in one corner of the car, the other three corners will continue operating as normal. A neat cutaway of the Tempo body. You can see the front half of the shell is very much the same as the Escorts. And I say front half, I should specify the engine portion of things, the firewall and forward. The rest of the car is different. More body features as they try bragging about the Taurus and Tempo. You know, they're two newer cars. Yeah, more sound ending info. They go over some seat design, reclining low back bucket seats. Yeah, nothing new. But they talk about it in case it was. Washer nozzle designs. Now they have molded headlights because it's 1986. And then they do go over minor fin breakdowns here. It's neat as they do provide all of the codes. That doesn't happen very often in these books. A lot of times they'll just give a general a sample. It would have like one or two of these, and that'd be it. I do talk about fuel economy labels a little bit. And then they give a quick reference chart right before all the cars actually begin. So over in this section, it would be, okay, so a buyer is interested in a four-door car, preferably something good on gas, but at the same time, they're of a larger build and they want something kind of sizable. You want to look at some of the specifications. Do you want two-door or four-door? Four-door preferably. Okay. Well, then I recommend the Tempo or the Taurus. Both those large cars and very fuel efficient for what they are, really. But you could do the opposite. You could come through and say, hey, I really need a big engine for towing. I got the small pull-behind camper, or once a week we have to hook up the camper, we have to hook up the small open trailer, throw all our stuff in it for the dump. Well, it's okay, well, let's go down to the big cars. You'd want probably something with one of these big V8s. Let's see what your options are, and then you can go from there. Things like that. But it's neat, you can actually see them side by side, especially in these later years, now that you actually have the Escort and the Tempo and the Taurus all in the same place, because those are all very similar platform-wise. Then starts each of the individual tabs for the car models themselves. This one in particular starts off with LTD, Thunderbird, Taurus, the actual LTD Crown Vics. Kind of a confusing time, LTD Crown Vic. Not too far off, but at this point in time, I think the LTD was a Fox body car, and the Crown Vic was the even bigger car. If I'm mistaken, please do let me know. I'm not very good at the Mustang stuff. Unlike all the other books, these actually have colored photos. I don't believe my 87 or 88 books even have color photos. But I know my 83 and older ones, they do not. All the photos in them are black and white. Occasionally you do get a special or advanced edition book, like that thin 82 book in there from my Mercury's. And that will have colored paint and swatches towards the end. And that's kind of the best you get out of it. Anyway, we will spend a little bit of time on the tempo before we move on to our cars. So, some of you guys are the tempo gurus. That's fine. I don't have any, and I don't get to run across them. So in typical fashion, we'll kind of just hover over each of these, and you'll be able to check them out for yourselves. But this book is really neat because it's not too often you get to see tempos in such capacity. Sure, you can look at the tempo brochures, but unless you have one, who's going out of their way to acquire one? Because they're just not fascinating cars to begin with. A couple of years down the line, they really just blended in with everything else. They have zero defining characteristics unless you have an older one that has the recessed sealed beam headlights. But for 86, I think they were all molded. Looking back, because I'm not too great at the tempo identification. Yes, for 86 they're all molded. 84 to 85 they had the sealed beams. Here's the kind of shootout between each of the packages. These are all just standard features across each of the four trims, sorry. And then it carries on. The next page should be our options. Last is standard equipment. Plenty of that to go around. I guess some of the upper trims must have been really loaded, because there probably won't be too much for options after this. A lot of wheel options. That was the nicer thing, is as the years went by, they usually added more and more wheels, but they reduced all the other options. There'd be far fewer colors, far fewer interior options, exterior features, things like that. They would try consolidating these as quickly and easy as possible. So then on the assembly line, very minor changes ever had to be made between each individual car. And, well, that just kept carrying forward until today. The Contours that had replaced these Tempos in the mid-90s, they had squat features over their otherwise identical cars. So we'll move along to the Escort now. That concluded the tempo page. So like the Contours, you could basically all you could pick was your engine, transmission, and then from there were a few trims. They did have the SVT performance trim. Otherwise, it would just be SE, the GL, and maybe LX, and then base. And there really wasn't much difference between them. Just body work, like cladding, kind of like the GT versus non-GT Escorts. And wheels, and those, and the seat fabrics. That was about it. So 86 is a big year for the Escort too. Like I said, pretty much every Ford got shaped by this point. They all either had a facelift or a rebody. Well, the Escorts had really a facelift, but the back end of the cars did change. The tail lights are no longer interchangeable with the prior years, even though they are the same shape. So everything firewall backwards from these in the earlier cars is basically the same. But certain parts don't quite swap over so easily. The GT is kind of this new fancy hot shot. Because all the base model cars, you can see they don't have the GT cladding. Here's actually all three trims. The LX, L, and another LX. They're not too far off from the ponies, really. So the GT now looks substantially different than the other cars, as it has molded fascia bumpers versus these exposed metal ones. And then performance-wise, it's got a lot of advantages over the other cars too. As far as the interior goes, things didn't really change between 86 and the prior years. Dashboard has been around since 84 now. The whole back of the car, I believe, is the same from 84 to 88. You can say the same about all the seats. Here's the standard feature shootout. Notice that the wagon versions are in a different category. A lot of the times the wagons are equipped with different mechanical features due to the size and weight, and then different comfort and accessory features due to their size. Well, in their general application, you'll be using those for hauling people or cargo a lot more than you would the normal cars. The normal cars are more or less runarounds for economy or performance if you have the GT. The GT also gets the high output engine, so that's standard EFI. All the other cars for 1986 will be carbureted or diesel. So here's your powertrain options. We do have a few here. So you can have a 1.9 carbureted with 4-speed, really tall final drive 4-speed. This is the tallest of all the transmissions. 1.9 carbureted with 4-speed manual. This one has the slightly quicker gearing, slightly quicker final drive. It's more comparable with the older 4-speeds. And then 1.9 carbureted with 5-speed, optional and everything, but standard on the highest trim, the LX. You can also get the carbureted 1.9 with the automatic. Again, optional everywhere. But like I said, the GTs only get the EFI engine. And for 86, you can only get it with the 5-speed. For 1987, it was optional with the automatic. They're extremely rare. From what we can tell in the from existing Marty reports, only like 7, 8, or 9 of these cars, of the GTs, were 1.9 high outputs with an automatic. So extremely rare. And then you could only even option for that for 87, maybe 88, and then after that, the option was gone again. So extremely rare combination, but not a good one. You want that 5-speed manual. 3-speed, it's very pokey. It's essentially this really tall 4-speed, if you can imagine that, without top gear. So the first 3 gears of this are directly comparable with the 3-speed automatic. And then that's before you remember how much heavier the automatic is, and then how much power that torque converter is sucking away from the engine. The final powertrain option is a 2-liter diesel. These are fairly uncommon, actually, and they're available in every trim except for the base car and the performance car. And they only came with 5-speed manual. No automatics. A number of wheel and tire options, but not as many as the Tempo. Ford was kind of trying to shift the Tempo from economy to a kind of like a mid-sized all-arounder, like the Contour was. There was some economy features of it, but at the same time, it was a little fancy. Some basic options here. Really nothing fun. AC, clock, console, rear defrost, full instrumentation. That'd be nice. Roof racks and remote mirrors. Paint options, light groups. Radios, not too many options. They had more or less standardized. You either get no radio, AM, or AM FM stereo with like cassette. So I bet that's what we'll see. Yep, AM FM stereo, AF FM stereo cassette. Oh, and then premium sound. That one's pretty rare. Cruise control, fairly often. Even if a car didn't have that from the factory, a dealer can easily add in the factory one, let alone the dealer system where it has all the cruise controls on this turn signal stock. Tilt steering wheel, that's pretty uncommon. Pivoting front window vent, very uncommon. Those are crazy rare cars. Rear window wiper, pretty uncommon. And then there's some general statistics where you can shoot out each of the three body styles. The two-door hatchback I refer to as the coupe. The four-door hatchback I refer to as the sedan, and then the four-door wagon. Then anytime you see red print, know that there's usually a disclaimer involved with that. A few final specifications. One thing to note is the steering ratio between manual and power is different. The brakes do differ. The drums, if you have a GT car, you have 8 inches. All of the wagons have 8-inch rears. There's a few differences in gas tanks too, but maybe... there we go. So by 86, it was standardized. So 86 Ford, all cars have a 13-gallon gas tank. No exception. I'd take that back. The Pony car might have an 11-gallon tank. We've seen literature quote that, and that's totally possible. Because the Pony car was focused on fuel economy, job numero uno. It's got the fuel saver engine. It's got the special gearing to optimize fuel economy. And it's as lightweight as possible. You're not even allowed hardly any options for it. It's fuel economy first, everything last. And if you have a smaller fuel tank, you're carrying around less weight. Ergo, you're going to sip less fuel. And we go over the last of the options, the transmission and engine options. You can actually see the final drives side by side here. And that concludes the Escort. We dive into the 86 EXP next. They don't have a photo. We've been had. The Escort gets a photo. Where's the EXP photo, huh? They have to see the revised 11 of 85. So at this point in time, there might not have been a photo for the EXP yet. But it was definitely there, and it's been rebodied. Oh, well, look at that. There's photos. They just couldn't get a color photo up in corporate Ford. All right, what's new for the EXP? Well, everything that was new for the Escort, and that's it. Uh, New upgraded luxury coupe. Well, I don't know about that. All new sport coupe. Well, this is true. Standard and turbo coupe models discontinued. Also true. All right, so a lot of mechanical changes. Basically, everything we talked about with the Escort. All the 1.6s are now gone. They've all been replaced with 1.9s. These are all blocks casted about 1/4 of an inch taller. And what that means is the pistons are now 1/4 of an inch further from the valves. So, uh, should your timing belt break, there's no instance whatsoever in the known universe where your valves can interfere with your pistons anymore. So all these 1.9s, and then from here forward, 86 on up, 1.9s and 2.0 CVHs, any of them are no longer interference. And as a side result, since they enlarge the displacement of each of these, they all have more power. Roughly 20 horsepower improvement if you're comparing stock to stock. Handling suspension kind of has been standardized. From here on out, the TRX suspension system and tires, they're all gone. They've been standardized so that the performance cars now just have the best performance suspension available. And the cars that are not the performance cars, they have squat. They just have the standard suspension. Single key for door and ignition locks. Again, another change for 86. You will have one key, and that one key does the doors and the locks. All prior years, you had one key for doors, one key for the ignition. The ignition one would be square. The round oval key, that would do all of your doors. New design, new front fascia, including aerodam headlights and chin spoiler. Yes, boom, there it is. No more frog face for the EXP. Yep, new rear fascia 2, which includes a deck spoiler on all cars with center brake light. Yes. So from here on out, actually, the blackout taillights have been standard on EXP since '84. The spoiler, which is the same as the turbo model, will be on every Escort from '86 forward. Every EXP from '86 forward. I say Escort because I saw it right here. From '86 forward, all these EXPs will be known as Escort EXPs. And when you look inside the '87 and '88 books or brochures, any of those literatures, you'll see the EXP inside the Escort tab, just listed as another body. So then you'll show for bodies Escort Coupe, Escort Sedan, Escort Wagon, Escort EXP. That's how that goes. Upgraded tires and wheels. What to do? Some of them look worse. Upgraded interior. I'll be the judge. The '84 to on up interiors are quite cheap feeling. With the exception of the '88.5s. Those are kind of neat. You get sport luxury seats. Odd combo. Anywho, integrated side moldings. Yeah! So side moldings are now standard on all these cars as well. Previously, only the turbo models would have these more conservative side moldings. So that's the luxury coupe. The sport coupe, however, gets the more exaggerated side moldings that more correctly match the GT bumpers on the front and back. So that's kind of the big difference between these two is the engine. So this one will have the carbureted 1.9, about 90 horsepower. This one will have the fuel injection 1.9 EFI high output. So fuel injected spits out 110 horsepower. Both are only available as 5 speeds. If you have the luxury coupe, you may have a 3-speed automatic. Suspension wise, they're identical, but the GT will have a, well, I say GT. The Sport Coupe will have the Escort GT suspension, which includes a thicker sway bar up front, supposedly different shocks, but at this point in time it doesn't matter. Any of these shocks are going to be 40 years old. They're no longer comparable to what was then there, and what has replaced them now is all just the same stuff anyway. So, like I said, it didn't matter. Rear sway bar is present on the Sport Coupe, not present on the Luxury Coupe. That's kind of the big thing. If you're trying to improve handling on any of these EXPs or Escorts, you need to get your hands on an 86 to 90 Escort GT or EXP Sport Coupe parts car. That will have the suspension you want. Not to mention, it will have the best engine and a 5-speed transmission. That's a win all around. Body-wise, these are mostly the same. Passenger side mirror, still optional. But the EXP mirrors, they are all shaped like this. Unless maybe the manual mirrors were still present. If they were, they would be round, and I think they were for the first year, 86 here. Anywho, bubble backs on all the cars. All the C panel sales all say EXP. That's a carryover from the turbos. Front bumper is the same across all these, but the GT will have fog lamps, while the Luxury Coupe will just have filler panels. And then I believe both have the same rear bumper, and this is specific to the EXPs. The Escort bumper, well, the Escort GT bumper is identical, except for it doesn't have these 3 vents in the bottom of it. So these look even more sporty on the EXP. And then, of course, the Sport Coupe has fancy aluminum wheels. The Luxury Coupe has these crappy steelies. But I think polycasts were optional. Key product features involving the interior. And some mechanical parts, I should say. Most of it's standardized stuff. Full instrumentation is standard on all the EXPs. You will not have the cheap Escort gauge set. The Escort GTs, they all had a tach and speedometer, coolant temp, and then fuel level. On the cheapest Escorts, you get a speedometer, fuel gauge, and then just a handful of idiot lights. Nothing else. Still going through the list here. Not much outstanding information. Handling, suspension, all things we had mentioned. Fog lamps. Yep, Sport Coupe gets dual electric mirrors all the time, every time. The Sport Coupe also gets the full center console. The Luxury Coupe will often only have the consolette. So it's a tiny console that you would pretty much find in the lower level Escorts. They do have a rundown of all of the features of the dashboard, and they talk about the cargo area some. Here's the side-by-side comparison of the standard features across each of these cars. Most of it's the same until you get down to the mechanical section and the body section. But the interior is pretty similar. Big difference is the Sport Coupe will have the halo headrest seats, and the Luxury Coupe will not. They'll have the more conserved seats. That's consolette versus console thing I talked about. Locking glove box. Most Escorts don't have that, but EXPs do. Sport Coupes have a leather wrapped wheel. The Luxury Coupes will have an otherwise identical wheel, but all just molded or padded foam. So something to that extent, some sort of molded or padded vinyl. 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 Some sort of molded or Brakes, they're all the same across all these cars. Functional, still going down the list, not much for differences. Manual rack is standard on the base car. Power steering is standard on the sport car. If you have a sport coupe, I recommend switching to the manual rack. The power rack, it adds a lot of weight. It adds load on the engine. And the feel is poor. The manual rack feels and performs much better. And they go over some of the performance options availability here. Like I said, carbureted 1.9 with 5-speed. That's the luxury coupe standard. 1.9 carbureted with automatic, optional for luxury. And then the high output 5-speed is the only thing you can get for the sport coupe. And that's the only way to get it. 2 options for wheels, standard ones, and then special handling tires. Not that that matters. Again, 40 years later, they won't have whatever was there. And only 2 options for wheels. Maybe they hadn't added polycasts to the list yet. So now the rest of the options. So these are things you can add or subtract onto each of the cars. It's not much. As the EXPs went on, Ford really only took more and more away from them. They didn't really add more. The performance upgrades they got for 86 Ford were only there because they were the same as what the Escort was getting. And then you can see a shootout of each of the gear ratios. But interesting seeing that the 5-speed comes in 2 different types of final drives, because my other literature says they don't. Dual transfer ratios, 1 for first, 3 fourth, and reverse, and 1 for fifth. We'll have to look at the powertrain section for that. But that's the end of the Escort category. You can see down at the bottom, it's Escort EXP now. I throw in a blank page just because. So the last car is the Aerostar. We're going to skip over that. Color and trim, we're going to skip past that for now and go straight to powertrains, because I want some instant clarification on that thing we just saw. Transaxle front wheel drive, MTX's available 5 speeds that incorporate optimized gear ratios for fuel economy and performance. This is true. Low viscosity automatic transmission fluid is used to improve fuel economy and provide acceptable shift efforts when cold. This is also true. The front wheel drive manuals, they're all filled from the factory with ATF. I think it's Mercon 5 or Mercon V. I'm pretty sure it's Mercon V. But they fill that in there so you get optimal fuel economy. And the thicker the fluid, the more drag. And then at the same time, when it's very cold, it still performs decent. It's something I've noticed in my Contours and Cougars. When someone has gone in there and put in some thicker fluid, and it's like below 0, even just the stock fluid can make the engine stall out when you let out the clutch. With the stock ATF. So you really wouldn't want anything thicker in a Contour if that's what you're dealing. And I'm going to say that's the same thing for the Escorts and EXPs. Internal gates. Yes, this is true. 5 speeds incorporates all the beneficial features of the 4-speed plus a unique method for attaining 5th gear ratio. A dual final drive is utilized, which allows flexibility and greater gear strength for equivalent underhood space availability. The dual final drive provides the effect of overdrive in 5th gear. Well, I know in the 5 speeds there is a third shaft, so I'm guessing it utilizes that. And that's probably only a difference. Yeah, lube for life. I wouldn't recommend that. Every 100,000 it would be smart to change it. So with that not cleared up, let's go to the color and trim category. So in here they actually show all the colors, and they do a decent job of them. These are not genuine paint swatches. These are high quality printer ink swatches. So this is not real paint. Mind you, these are pretty close. Bright reds are exactly what they would be. Midnight Canyon Red is exactly what it would be. But herein lies the problem with mid-80s cars. Very stereotypical. Can you see a trend here? Everything is gray, black, very dark blue, very dark red, and the occasional tan. Versus the early 80 cars, those were far more poppy. You would have bright yellow, bright red, bright blue, white, black, loads of silvers, plenty of two-tone options. A lot of that stuff got thrown out the window by 86. This car has got a lot more drab, and that's continued to follow. All these companies have been able to convince consumers that boring and consolidated is the new deal. So now everyone drives around in the same looking thing. Okay, so they do list the specific paint info for each car. We will jump right ahead to the Escort and then the EXP categories. So down here, page 21, here's all the Escort paint codes. So how it works is off to the left are each of the available paint colors. Here's each of the codes for those. And then off to the right is the code for the pinstripe you would have when you look up and see what color the interior has. So if you have a Oxford white car and you have a medium gray interior, look for where they cross, you would have code E for stripes. You will have a bright red stripe if your car is white with a gray interior. That's how it works. So in photos of old cars, and you can't even see the interiors, from 20, 50, 100 feet away, if you can see the pinstripe, you'll know what interior that car had, so long as it was the original paint job anyways. And then after that, it goes into just general options and trim codes. So that's just the available paints and each of the available interior colors for the GT cars. Now we get into the interior codes. So up top they have each of the interior colors available. There's only 4 of them at this point in time. 3 depending on some of your trims. But for the most part there's just the 4. You get a dark red, a dark blue, a gray, and a tan. So you have each of those. Off to the left is each of the trims. And then under each trim is a seat style. For the most part, they have 2, except for the GT, they always have sport seats. So, let's say you have an LX, a higher trim car, and you want the cloth and vinyl low back buckets. So that would be seat code H, that's the type of seat. And then you would want, depending on what exterior color you have here, dictates your interior color, but you think you're going to have red seats. We move on over to red. H is our seat code. Red is the D code. You would have seats HD. And you'll be able to see this on your door jamb sticker of the car. Will be a 2-digit letter scheme for your interior code. If you see an HY on there, you have cloth and vinyl low backs in sand beige. And then the same thing just carries on. But we'll hover over all of it so you can see it all side by side. But I do have a comparison chart in my Escort and EXP database and registry. It's the same file. You can actually see all of that side by side in a color chart. Very easy to read, very comprehensive, quite foolproof, and it's actually very colorful. Makes it quite more enjoying to read than all these charts. For the EXP, things are pretty slim. Okay, we only have 2 trim levels of car, which means we only have 3 types of seats, and we only have 4 interior colors now anyways, because it's 86. So our options are quite limited. You can see we've lost the trim code, sorry, not the trim code, the pinstripe color combos, because they aren't present on the GTs and the EXPs. Those trim codes, or the pinstripes, are no longer there. They're gone. They don't identify anything because they're not there. They do have some engine information. We showed you the transmission stuff. We're going to skip over a lot of the stuff on the right here. Not much of that's necessary at all. We'll look at some of the engine features. So people ask all the time who only have the base level 1.9, what's the difference between this one and the J digit engine? Well, let's show you here. So this on the left is the carbureted 1.9. It's by and large the same as the carbureted 1.6, but the combustion chamber is different. It now is a heart-shaped combustion chamber. They might, I think they call it the fast burn. Later, this coming 87, this would be replaced with a 1.9 CFI, so central fuel injection. The carburetor is replaced with a throttle body that's mounted, I should say mounted horizontally, so the air goes down into it, and then suspended over the throttle body is a fuel injector that goes pss, 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 right onto the butterfly valve. So it's a crudely replaced carb. Those engines, they are all called lean burn, and they have a more kidney bean shaped combustion chamber. But the thing is, those combustion chambers are compatible only with the pistons they were born with, so you cannot be changing those. As you can see on the carburetor 1.9, it's now flat top pistons. The all the 1.6s for us anyways, here in North America, they were all Hemi heads with Hemi pistons. While I keep jabbing, you can see some of the technical specs here. Everything I'm seeing covers most of it. The 1.9 EFI high output, however, is still the Hemi type and configuration. We'll hover over these two so you can see the performance side by side. Horsepower of 86 at 4,800 versus horsepower of 108 at 5,200. Torque at 114 at 4,200. This one is 100 foot-pounds at 3,000 RPMs. Compression ratio of 9 to 1, 9 to 1. Everything else is more or less the same. The valves on the Hemi heads are larger, and that's where you get most of your flow between the valves being larger and the combustion chamber being more round to accommodate better flow in and out of those valves as they initially open and initially close, and as they finish closing, I should say. So that's where a lot of the magic comes from. So then towards the end, there is a tab for options, and it's got a quick index covering most features you'd find inside a car, options and otherwise, and where to find each of them throughout the book, and then starts going over them. Some are generic, and some of them are model specific. You'll see some stuff unique to the Escort, EXP, and Tempo. Yada yada. Nothing too crazy yet. Heavy duty alternators. Not that that means anything. They're all the same now. Clock system. Generic across all Fords. Cargo covers. kind of the same thing across all cars. That's more or less it. You can see some of these engine and transmission comparisons. I don't know why. That was present at the beginning of the book. Some stuff like locking fuel doors, premium sound, tinted glass, graphics that don't exist on our cars, full instrument, digital instrument clusters, which our cars don't have. It's the full instrumentation I was talking about for our cars. Keyless entry, kind of only a Taurus thing, maybe a Crown Vic thing. Picnic table extension in the Taurus wagon. Well, that's something I've never seen before. Cargo rack on... it says tempo. Sure looks like my 88 Mustang, but I think that is actually a tempo. The thickness of the deck lid and then the taillights kind of give away the tempo deal. Luxury interiors, dual remote mirrors, sunroofs. Kind of became the only option for the Sport Coupe EXP was the sunroof and premium sound. And here's each of those radio head units and a brief summary of how each compares to existing units. Rear facing third seat in the Taurus. Yeah, I think that only stuck around for the first year or so. Spoiler options our cars don't have. Power steering and tilt wheels. And they don't show any of ours, but they do talk about it a little bit. Some heavy suspension and heavy towing options. Oh my god. LTD Crown Vic with the Aerostream. Wow. And tow mirrors. Optional tires. Some spare tire info. All of ours were just the same. More stuff, yada yada. That is on the Thunderbird or LTD. Pivoting mirrors. Pretty rare. Wheel cover options. Again, none of these are for our cars. These Taurus ones, I think in here they are. I think it's a painted ring, but with a chrome center. The 88.5 to 90 Escorts, the LXs, would get this kind of same style wheel cover towards the end of their life. Hey, cool. Phone dials. You don't see those very often. Those are for the Mustang. I've never seen a Mustang with those on them. These are fairly uncommon Mustang LX wheels. You'd only find them on the LX 2.3. Thunderbird wheels. This one's basically that LX Mustang wheel. And then here's your Escort wheel options. This one's a pretty rare bird, but this one's a polycast, and because it looks so dang cheap, it looks like it's a plastic wheel cover. Most people pitch these, and they're very rare to come across now. These ones, however, very common. You'll find these on a lot of 86 on up low trim cars, the lowest trim cars. These you'll find on the mid trim cars. The windshield wiper stock will change. I think I'm 87 or 88. They changed the windshield wiper stock. They can incorporate it into an all-in-one stock. But for 86, I'm pretty sure it was the same as prior years, where you have that second stock. Matter of fact, we can actually confirm that over here. I picked the EXP one just because there's so few. Yep, there we go. 2 stocks, and then if you have tilt steering, that's your tilt stock. Alright, final section is safety. Let's see what there is in here for here. The next year would introduce all the automated shoulder belts. So the ones where you hop in your car and the belt starts down low at the A-pillar, you know, like halfway up the A-pillar, and then goes up to the corner and secures you. Child locks are now an integrated feature on a lot of the 4-door cars. But otherwise, that's it. Safety hadn't really changed much. It would be in late 88, but for sure 89. 89 starts airbags in most Fords. Not all of them, just primarily the big ones to start with. Final feature is trailer towing. I don't know if there's going to be much for us in here. I know that there are towing options for our cars, but they are small. Again, there is a LCD with the Aero Stream, and our cars can't handle any of those. Talks briefly about some of these systems. This is what a lot of the Escorts will have. These 2 brackets the big bracket in the way back will bolt into your spare tire well, and the smaller one up front will bolt onto your metal bumper, and then you'll have this hitch tongue hanging out after that. I've got a couple of those, and they mount in a few different ways. I think some are dealer, some are factory, some are aftermarket. Trailer towing chart. Our car isn't even on here. Okay, another chart. Here we go. Okay, here's the rest of it. Yeah, you do have the Mustang. Gross trailer weight, 1,000 pounds max. Dang! All of the 1.6 cars, they're only rated for 300 pounds with 100 on the ton. Yeah, you gotta have the manual if you plan on towing. I have a hitch on one of my automatics. I actually had a hitch on 2 of my automatics. That wouldn't be wise. If you're dragging 100 pounds over to the dump, okay, that's one thing. You won't want to be doing anything else with it. Trailer towing tips. Well, again, none of that applies to us, because if you're towing only a couple 100 pounds, it hasn't really changed anything. You're basically carrying what your cargo weight would be in the back seat. So that kind of concludes everything for 86. I know it was quick and easy, but that's how it goes with these later years. The earlier cars just have more to them. There's more there. There's more options even. So as great as these newer ones are on paper and on track, the older ones are just where it's at. And you can see it right here. 83 book, 86 book. The 83 book has 2 less cars, and you can see it's just as thick of paper as the 86 book. I think that says everything that needs to be said. So that's that. I'm still on the hunt for an 84 and 85 book. If I do that, my collection will be complete. Someday, if I can get an 89 and a 90 just for the Escorts, that'd be great. I did that with the 81 book, and then come to find out, I actually had the EXP in it. That was miraculous. Yeah, so it's pretty nifty. But that's about it. So I'm going to leave you guys be. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to say so, and we'll see you in the next one.